And I call the member for Indi.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm pleased to speak to the Higher Education Support Legislation Amendment, a more sustainable, responsible and transparent higher education system Bill 2017. I believe this bill does not adequately support regional universities and their students. I will not support the bill in its current format and will be proposing amendments in the consideration in detail stage. In my speech, I will address 3 points. First, outline my amendments as a practical solution to ensure that regional universities and their students are not disadvantaged. Secondly, recognise the central role regional universities play in driving the economic, social and cultural value of our communities. And finally, to acknowledge the role of my community and the role of regional universities. It's not only working actively to raise these issues, but coming to the table to genuinely work with me and identify solutions. My amendments will legislate for a national regional higher education strategy and provide some financial relief to students studying in regional Australia through a help debt repayment. The National Regional Higher Education Strategy will ensure regional higher education is prioritised and remains a focus of future governments. It will require the Minister to table the strategy in Parliament in early 2018 and review and update the strategy every 4 years. The introduction of a regional student help debt repayment-free period will create a help debt repayment-free period for students studying at regional universities. This will provide a financial incentive to students to study in regional communities. It will encourage regional students to remain in the regions and potentially attract students from the major cities. The Parliamentary Budget Office has costed this proposal at having and let me stress, only $21.6 million cost to the headline cash payment over the forward periods to 2020-21. Only $21.6 million, a very small investment with an enormous return on investment for regional communities and those that live there. Deputy Speaker, as you know, our regional communities do more than educate. They are one of the largest and most visible physical, intellectual, cultural and sporting assets in our regions and cities. They are a critical player in workforce planning. They are a driver of economic growth and development. They are key employers. They innovate. They inspire. They act as major attractors to young people, and they can make the difference between economic survival and going backwards. All regional MPs in this House know the many advantages related to living in regional Australia's towns and cities, including affordability and livability. Small cities can have the benefits of big cities without the disadvantages. They can be both highly productive and great places to live. The government knows this too. They tell us in the Region's 2030 Unlocking Opportunity report, and I quote, "Regional Australia is not just important to those of us who live here. The Australian economy is largely driven by its regions. Australia's agriculture, forestry, fishery and mining industries, predominantly located in regional Australia, make up 57% of the value of Australia's merchandise exports in 2016. 57%, and 45 cents in every dollar spent in Australia by international or local visitors is spent in regional areas. Most of the gas and electricity which powers our city households is produced in regional Australia. And it's only logical that we should invest in Australia's regions because Australia's regions power Australia's economy, says the government report. Investing in our regions pays massive dividends. And for our regions, stronger regions are the foundation of strong Australia. So that's from the government's own propaganda. So let me say that again. It's only logical that we should invest in Australians' regions because Australia's regions power Australians' economy. My community knows the value of regional universities. They know that regional universities enable the best use of human capital and resources and contribute to educational opportunities, economic prospects, innovation and community capacity. The uni's teaching and learning activities, research and innovation and service functions contribute to human capital development, regional governance and planning, community development, health and ageing, care, arts, culture, sport, environmental sustainability and industry and business development. Our unis provide leadership in stimulating positive change, and staff and students play active and visible roles in the community. And for many regional centres, a strong university presence is intrinsic to a strong regional presence. And large regional centres such as Albury-Wodonga have surely benefited from the presence of Charles Sturt and La Trobe University. In the Borders case, it's the added advantage of 2 university colleges, and I particularly like to acknowledge the role of Wodonga TAFE. But Charles Sturt University, Australia's largest regional university, is a result of the formation of the Bathurst Experimental Farm and the Wagga Wagga Experimental Farm in the 1890s. In one form or another, research, innovation and education has been integral to the university's character and the mission for more than a century. My communities recognise the value and the values of access to education, specifically tertiary education, and they have consistently raised this as a priority. In the post-budget survey that my staff and I carried out in May, more than 1,000 people across the electorate, 92% of respondents, identified education as their top priority. And they made the following points. Forcing graduates to repay loans at a lower income threshold will just create a new category of poor. Better to leave them enough money to spend, to live, to invest, to pay for housing and to have their families. So clearly regional universities and the ability to have money and live in your community is really important. Marilyn Baker told me that something needs to be done to support country kids for their tertiary education when they can't live at home. Ian Jarvie said that education and equitable access to all ensures diversity and access to information and better decision and innovation. Support for regional kids to attend universities includes regional subsidies, better and more relevant transport and more connectivity within the regional centres. Adrian Twitt tells me that country students are handicapped in accessing tertiary education. There needs to be more support for such students. So today I'm standing up for those in my electorate who have asked me to do so, to stand up for accessibility and for positive discrimination for rural and regional people and universities. And La Trobe and Charles Sturt universities and the Regional University Network told the Senate inquiry into education and employment the net effect of this complex package can be summarised as government reducing the level of public investment in higher education while increasing the amount of student contributions. Students are asked to pay more for a university education that is funded less, and country students have to pay even more. The evidence provided that the bill runs counter to the importance of the sector to Australia and our regional economies. It sidesteps the critical issues of support for regionally delivered higher education and creates disincentives for improving the participation of retention of underrepresented student cohorts. They went on to say the proposed bill in its current form would destabilise the foundation of Australia's world-class university system, and Australia cannot afford to risk our economic future and jeopardise the potential of our students by undermining the capacity of our higher education sector. I believe this legislation will do that. Mr Deputy Speaker, we know that regional students remain underrepresented in higher education institutions, and data shows that regional and remote students make up just 18.8% of domestic undergraduate students at universities, 18.8%, compared to 26.4% for the population as a whole. But we know the real threat to rural communities is a declining population, particularly of our young people. The trend is to lose young people to the cities as they leave their country homes for opportunities related to employment, education and training and leisure in urban centres and overseas. Statistics show that they are unlikely to return in a hurry. The Regional Universities Network reports that people who study in regions largely stay in the regions. And a study undertaken by the Regional University Network demonstrates that between 60% and 80% of the employed recent graduates of those universities were employed in regional Australia. So if they study locally, they stay locally. And herein lies the problem. The government proposed package will disproportionately affect low-income households. For students who are studying and working part-time, financial pressure has been shown to be a major contributor to a student's decision to drop out or not take up higher education. Far away from family and community support, this captures regional students who go to metro areas at a disproportionate rate. And while the independent review considers students who will look to travel to metropolitan universities, it does not support the students who elect to continue their education at a regional university. These very issues are at best barely adequately addressed and at worst ignored completely. In closing today, I want to reflect on the words from this week's editorial in the Border Mail, my local paper, and it supports my call for a national regional higher education strategy. And I finish with these words. For several decades now, through some of the larger regional centres such as Albury-Wodonga, we have benefited from a university presence. And in the Borders case, it has had the added plus of go-ahead TAFE colleges. Charles Sturt University has certainly long championed the enormous value of regional economies that come from developing and providing courses that turn out graduates with a commitment and a knowledge about rural Australia, as well as having a significant commitment to research. La Trobe University, which of course also has had a long border presence, has a similar commitment. And that is why everything must be done to ensure there is no attempt to water down these universities at a time when their commitment is to expand in order to even better serve regional areas. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, in closing, I'm speaking against this legislation. I ask my colleagues opposite to stand up for rural and regional Australia, to actually do what needs to be done and support my amendments when I bring them on in the third reading, to show their dedicated commitment for what we know to be true. Without support, our rural universities that underpins our whole economic development in our regions will be at stake. And it is too important to let go on a whim that the National Party, let me say opposite, and the Liberal Party, they vote because they're told to vote. So, in closing, colleagues, can I say, will you please stand up for rural and regional Australia? Will you please do the right thing? Will you please convince the government that we've got to do better by our regions?
All right,